Max here from Life to the Max show. A quick tip here. We just did a sojourn over to a local Costco, bit of a drive. And I thought you can't lose by having extra batteries. You only lose when you don't have enough. You have extra to share, or you just have what you need to be able to handle a year-long situation. And as I pointed out in other battery segments, I've got adapters for these, which will allow me to put a C into a D-shaped adapter. You remember when I did a segment on this? In fact, I got to put a link to that because it was a fantastic segment on everything batteries. But there's an adapter right here. It has a C adapter, which goes into a D adapter. This allows you to put a AA into a C, or a C into a D, or a AA into the C adapter, into the D adapter, and theoretically you can run a D appliance with a AA battery. In fact, they even have, I kid you not, AAA into a AA adapter. That way, if you want to have a spare battery for either a AA or AAA mini flashlight, and you have a device like a mini laser or something else that uses a AAA, then you can put that AA adapter in there and just store one extra battery, and then that will fit either your AA or your AAA devices. And I probably mentioned that in the other segment, but just real quick, I thought it'd be good to have some extra C's. And like I say, you're never penalized for having extra fuel in your tank when your plane lands. But here's the deal. I realized that all these other batteries I purchased, I never did write down when I got them. So we really don't know how old they are. It's guaranteed 10 years. By the way, back in the day when they would say expires or best if used by dates, those, all they meant was, and everyone thinks, well, it hit that date. It must be expired. Let me throw them out. Or they're just not good. But all that meant, from my understanding, if I remember the little factoid correctly, but it said they have between 83 and 84% of their original storage capacity. That's all it meant when they hit that best if used by date. Now they're saying, all right, we got the better technology. In the last 10, 15, 20 years, our battery technology has improved, and these are good for now 10 years. And lithiums, they're even better. They will store very long time, and they will last very long time. And the benefit of them, of course, you'll see from that other video, is that they work in the cold, where these don't necessarily work as well. If you store batteries for AA's or AAA's for your emergency radio communications, like for FRS or GMRS radios, for like a CERT team, and you store these radios in your CERT cache with other emergency supplies, so that if there is an emergency or disaster in your area, you can augment the local first responders, and you can also help out when they're overloaded by helping to search. And if you had radios that can communicate back to some kind of headquarters, and you were in a cold weather environment, these would slow down and stop working so well, whereas the lithium will work in the cold. So you'll check out the other video that we have that we'll be posting. Actually, I don't know where it is. I've got so many videos we're going through. We're labeling them. We're editing as we go. And as we dig on through all that awesome content, stay tuned for that. But here's the deal. I haven't dated them, so I don't know. 10 years from what date? So as I always say, date it and rotate it. Date it and rotate it. So keep a Sharpie handy almost everywhere. Put it on the end of a string so it doesn't float. And always have one ready in a common area that you would normally do stuff in, or in your office. And that way, as soon as you have something come into your house, you stocked up on some frozen chicken, and you can label the packages if you're going to keep freezing it, or when you want to label the lids when you've pressure canned it, so that you know when it was done. So you got the time. And that way, you know to use the older stuff up first and put the fresh stuff in the back end. This is something they do in Switzerland. I'm going to see if I can get some home video from some colleagues of mine that are the North American distributors for the Swiss Lua filters, the same filters that the government uses in Switzerland. Because Switzerland has mandates that everybody has a shelter. All public structures have a shelter, and they stock their huge shelters underneath the soccer fields of all of the little hamlets and little towns that are outside of the big cities, where people commute out to the towns. They live there in like bedroom communities, but they're old hamlets. Every one of those communities, they have a large shelter for like 1,500 people underneath the soccer field of the local school. And they're just phenomenal. And I'm going to see if I can get a link to some home video of these filter reps that were over there talking with the companies that make these for the government. In other words, they're making to government mandated standards or code for every new structure. So they were able to mass produce these filters and get them down to a reasonable price for the homeowners that are building structures, so that as they're putting in new plumbing or new electrical work, they put in the air handling system in these filters for their shelters that are attached to all the public structures. So you will see in there, in this home video, they have an infirmary in there where they can handle all kinds of emergency medical stuff. So if somebody's injured in a nearby blast, and they rush them, everybody goes inside the shelter, they can deal with injuries of those people. They have doctors and they can operate. They have operating rooms. They can literally flush away dead tissue and it goes away and disappears because their systems are designed to handle that conveniently for everyone. And my friends were touring the facility they happened to be going through communities, an annual week-long drill. And they have civil defense people because, as I understand it, and we'll have to interview my friends on this. Every man is a member of the military till age 50, and once they through with their mandatory active service and training, then they're all members of the reserve at that point. And then they're, I think, part of civil service until age 60. So they all have assignments. They all deal with the shelters. There's a commander and a chain of command on operating that shelter and managing the operations. They even have a firefighting apparatus that can be able to unshield and open up the blast doors, whatever, and they can go out and they can put out fires and everything. That might be caused by, say, the flash of a nuclear device. So in other words, they are so well prepared to handle this that everyone says, you know what, we're not even going to mess with them. There's no way we can conquer them. Hitler took one look at Switzerland and said, never mind, we'll just go around them. And that's what they've done. And a lot of countries go there because they're neutral. But they're very, very, very prepared. So anyhow, I actually have some video that I did of a tour that I did. I was on a tour and I didn't have much time because we were going all through 6 different European countries, but we did a quick drive-by tour performance in this choir that I was in that happened to be in Switzerland. And I had a little time to be able to go in and talk to the local authorities about their civil defense system. And it happened to be in a distant, kind of a touristy type of a city that's not part of their industry and everything. So they were not as high speed on this as they used to be, but they did know that the tunnels nearby could house 20,000 people in the local community. It doubled as a hardened shelter for the tunnels for the trains. So they did have a plan in effect. And if things got worse and more risky, they would brush off those and tune them up. But most houses, all new houses since the early 70s, I think, somewhere in the 70s, they made it code for all new homes to have a shelter in them. And I think they inspect them. We're gonna have to interview the friends that are reps for that. They deal with shelters. I had a chance to tour some of their shelters that they put in for people all across the country. We'll do a tour of them. I'll try to find those videos that I did of my section in Switzerland. Oh, the point that I was making, because they were touring, my friends happened to be driving or traveling by when they noticed these people were doing these shelter drills. And they said, well, can we check this out? This is really good. We need to show everyone in America how to do this because this is what we should be doing. We should need to protect our citizens. And they said, yeah, sure. So they got to go through. They went through. They even showed they gave a room to the youth and they made a disco. And they painted the walls. And on the walls, I don't know if they're just being insensitive and maybe they wouldn't allow them to do it nowadays, but they had a picture of a bomb with a smile coming down on New York because they were an easy target for bad guys, including nuclear weapons. Something's going to hit there. And so they were kind of saying, yeah, we're prepared, but New York, you guys, you sophisticated so-called Americans, you have no idea what you're doing and you're not prepared, which is the truth. So anyhow, but as they were going through this facility, they went in the infirmary and they opened the drawers. And this is what I wanted to get to. They had morphine and other drugs sitting in the drawers. And they picked it up and they looked at it and they looked at the expiration date. And it was the freshest stock that just barely came off the line. And they're thinking, wow. So what they do is they put the freshest stuff in the shelters and then take the stuff out of the shelters while it's still viable and good and hasn't reached their expiry. And then they put that into the system and you go to the hospitals or the pharmacies to get the meds that you need before they go bad. Do they really go bad? That's another question for another time. We're going to be doing a segment or talking a little bit about how the Army did a test on medications that they had in stockpile and saying, are they still good? Because they invested a ton in a lot of medications for all their troops. And they wanted to know if they're still viable, even though they supposedly are past their expiration date. They found out that they are viable. We'll do an in-depth, we'll talk to some more and find some better research on that. But just don't necessarily throw out your stuff. But if it's a dangerous med, you need to make sure it's under lock and key and only you know where it is. And it cannot be easily grabbed by some teenager or somebody borrowing your bathroom in your bedroom because the main bath is busy and they happen to look through your medicine cabinet and see that there's maybe some opioids in there, So anyhow, they have the freshest stuff. They date it and they rotate it. They date it and rotate it. And that's what we need to learn from the very prepared and wise Swiss. Date everything, rotate it, keep it all fresh and viable. You don't have to worry about something that stores for 25 years. You just get something that stores for 3 or 4 years, but you rotate it on an annual basis and then you're good. and you know that everything that was put in your stuff was less than a year old, and it's all good for you. So anyhow, that's a quick tip. Just date it and rotate it. Till next time, max out.